Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flickering Myth. My name is EJ, and I have a special guest with me. We have a fellow Florida film critic, Woo, also a fellow SEFCA, our Central Association, our, Critics Association of Central Florida. We are film critics diving into a lot. Tony, thank you so much for joining me. We have a big discussion ahead of us.
Absolutely. I am very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm just very excited to get into some of our favorite and least favorite DC movies, as well as talking about Blue Beetle.
Yes, the Blue Beetle discussion will be interesting because, as I joked before we got on camera, there's not a lot to say. Good or bad, the movie exists as a film, but isn't that most of what people feel about the DCEU? I'm a longtime DC fan. You'll see my little Zack Snyder shrine back here. I have a VHS copy of Batman v Superman. We will talk about that movie in a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a thing I like, but I've also admitted it's been a rocky 2000. I'll say 16. No one really counted the Man of Steel era,
Yeah.
It got rocky 2016 for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
let's dive into Blue Beetle. You are my guest today. What is your quick little feelings of the new DC studios, DCEU, somewhere in everything?
Yes, I think that James Gunn was kind of walking a tightrope when he spoke about how Blue Beetle is going to be involved with the new DC universe. In that he said that specifically Blue Beetle is the first character that we're seeing in the new DC universe, but he did not say that the movie itself is the first movie of the DC universe. And I think I know why. And I think you probably agree with me on it because the movie is not that great. It's, for me, pretty middling. One of the things that really stood out to me when I do a little bit of research before I go and watch the movie, just to know who's writing it, who's directing it, that kind of thing, what their history is. And not to call out an individual, but the person who wrote Blue Beetle is not the most experienced writer. Their track record is basically a number of shorts that they did and one feature film that received pretty poor reviews. So to have someone without the level of experience that you require to come in and work on a project that is really important for your studio, to me was a misstep. And it is pretty obvious that the writing, the dialogue, the pacing, and just the overall story structure are really lacking in Blue Beetle.
So, I would definitely agree with some of those notes.
Okay.
I like the idea of bringing on a young, fresh talent.
Yes.
If you think of, it's weird to think of when they filmed it, but Eternals with Chloe Zhao, she was
Yes.
not Nomadland, Chloe Zhao yet. So, they really took a risk, which is not the best Marvel example ever, but that is an example of a good indie director with not the biggest plethora. And, Marvel and DC has kind of both done that throughout its history. And I like when they do it. This is one of those examples, which is also why I think Batgirl was as not great as it reportedly was, because they had a very similar situation. There were the people who did, the Bad Boys 3 movie.
Yeah.
Not really calling you up for stuff. But again, I still would have liked to see Batgirl. That's kind of my thing. Good or bad, artists make these movies. Let them make the movies. Fine. I'm a bit more positive on Blue Beetle than you. I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine. I thought there was a lot of elements that warmed me up. I love the Latino representation. I thought it was so authentic to that community. And that always gets you a notch when you feel this film is authentic to, like, oh, wow, I feel like I'm entering a world that is allowing me to vibe. And I love the characters. I actually like most of it. I'm not the biggest George Lopez person, so, he's in this movie and he's fine. But, there was dramatic moments. We'll get into vague spoilers, but they kill off a character midway through the movie that I was like, this added a darker tone to this movie than I was expecting.
Yes, and that, to me, would have had more weight if I didn't see it coming a million miles away. And again, that's an issue with the writing, where you're setting things up that are so predictable that when they finally happen, they're not as impactful as they could be. But yes, there were a number of things I really enjoyed about the movie as well. I think Xolo, Maridueña, the lead actor who plays Blue Beetle, I thought he was very good. Which again goes in line with my whole theory of James Gunn being like, this is the first character and the first actor that we're going to see in the new DC universe. And I think he did a perfectly fine job. I think he's going to do really well going forward. I did like George Lopez in here. He brought a lot of the comedy. The actress who plays the grandmother, I forget her name, the actress's name, but I thought she was very good, very funny as well. There were a couple of weaker actors or actresses throughout the movie or characters.
You better not be shading my queen, Susan Sarandon, who does the best with nothing. She has nothing but great outfits.
Yeah.
She looks great.
I
love her, but not her movie.
Yeah,
not her movie.
It felt like she was, there to do what she could do with the script that she was given, and it just didn't. It didn't really move me, or it wasn't anything. What they did with the villains in this movie weren't unique in any particular way. It was all things that we've seen before a number of times, both in Marvel and in DC. So
it's the thing Deadpool made fun of, was like, oh, look, the battle of just the same person now. Or Wolverine, that was a big part of the Logan film, was like, we're literally going to reference the fact that they're going to make the same villain that you fight. That was a Marvel problem for years. Marvel, your villain was just another version of you. It got tiresome, and I definitely see that in here. And it didn't keep it fresh. Villains, I think, are DC's usually strongest suit. In the DCEU, not as much. But if you go back to, like, historically, the DC villains have always stole the show. Penguin and Catwoman and Batman Returns. I mean, even Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin is the only one understanding the tone. These characters, and that's what this movie lacked, was a villain. Same thing with one of my least favorite ones we'll get into was, wow, the villains do not help this movie out at all. So you would like to see Blue Beetle return? Same actor, same everything. You could see a future with this?
Absolutely. I think that, depends on where James Gunn goes, specifically with this new Superman movie. I think the world that they built around Blue Beetle is very cartoonish, a lot more than we've seen previously in another DCEU movie. So if they're going towards more of that lighthearted, neon-filled, comedic focused world, then I think that his character will fit right into it. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what they do with the new Superman movie, which is going to be the first official film in the DC universe.
And I've seen some of the early rumblings of that story. It still doesn't seem that story. We'll see that Superman movie. That's another conversation we will have, Tony, one day about James Gunn's future Superman movie. There's a lot there. But yeah, I definitely think this character could work. I would like to see him in a James Gunn, not directed, but universe not Teen Titans. Yeah, maybe like a Teen Titans. I think that would be really fun. I think a Young Justice, maybe. Something like that could really work with this character, add a fresher tone, because, something I think we're missing, and Marvel's trying and it's not working, is young characters in these movies. Like, Ezra was in the middle-ish, by the time they got to film Flash, Ezra was like a 35-year-old human being, it felt like. But there was a kid-like quality to that character, and I think and that's something I liked about the Justice League movie with Ezra mixing with all the things. I'm like, a kid in this grown-up world, it's fun. I would like to see more kids in this DC world. So would you think a Young Justice route could be a way to alleviate a lot of our concerns?
I loved the Young Justice animated series, so I would totally buy that if they did something like that. And I think this is the perfect opportunity, to set up Blue Beetle as a potential leader in the world of Young Justice. We're getting Batman, the Brave and the Bold, which is going to introduce Damian Wayne, which is Bruce Wayne's son. Who I love.
There's an interaction from one of the animated movies with Damian and Blue Beetle. I forgot which one, and they fought, and it's so good. It was one of those like, oh, that live action. So, I didn't even think about Damian showing up here.
Yeah. So if we can, kind of build those younger characters. I mean, it's exciting for the fans, but it also just makes business sense. You have Xolo, the actor who's playing Blue Beetle. He's, I believe, 22 or maybe 23. So you can have him playing that role for 10 years easily. Maybe even longer. You can get a number of movies out of him as an actor alone. So to invest in these younger characters, these younger actors and actresses, it's going to just not only benefit the fans who are going to get more interesting and unique stories, but it's going to benefit the business that they're able to invest in these characters over a longer period of time, as opposed to having them just age out.
Yep, that's why I think Tom Holland's worked so well in the MCU, and I think that's why they've wanted to bank so much on him, is because they can keep him around. I like Cumberbatch, but how much longer is he going to really want to be in Marvel movies? Even RDJ tapped out, and he was making the most ungodly amount of money off these movies and could have still made that and still was like, I'm aging out. So I definitely agree. I would like to see Blue Beetle return. This movie, I think it's funny to see like a 2.5 movie, which I think I would feel this movie is for me, but mine's on the positive side of a 2.5. Yours would probably be on like the negative side of that. It's interesting of like, we're both like, it's, it exists.
Yeah. And I think it really it comes down to what is more important to you when you go to the movies. If you're going to the movies and you're going to examine more of the structure of how the film is made and different plot points and you're kind of breaking it down from a more academic point of view, then this is not going to work for you. But if you're just going there to enjoy seeing some CG characters fighting and blowing things up and cracking some jokes, then you're probably gonna have a good time watching this one.
Which we have enough of. So you know what? I want more serious looks at things. I want more well-made films. Which is an interesting segue into our next conversation about the DCEU, which has struggled for well-made films. We talked about things outside of this. Do we include Joker and the Batman? Because they're both, those are both more prestige films, but they don't really fall into the DCEU as it is. And Blue Beetle technically doesn't, but does. We're in a weird state. So we're going to be kind of talking about our specific DCEU, the Snatterverse, basically, that era of characters and what that was created from 2013 with Man of Steel to roughly The Flash. I know they're going to say Aquaman is vaguely something, but I think The Flash was kind of the send-off of what that universe is. Let's talk about our top, picks, bottom picks. Let's start with bottom so we can end on a more positive note. Tony, my friend, what is some of your bottom DCEU films?
So when coming up with my favorite and least favorite DCEU films, picking the top three was the most difficult, for sure. But picking the bottom three, for me, easy. I've known these movies are my bottom three from the moment I walked out of the theater watching them. They were immediately at the bottom of my list. The absolute worst DCEU movie, in my opinion, my personal opinion, of course, is the Suicide Squad, the original Suicide Squad, I should say, not the newer one. And that was a special experience seeing that one in theaters because I went with a friend of mine who owns a comic book shop, and he was raving about this movie, saying it was fantastic and that I was going to love it. And after watching it, we went to grab something to eat, and I looked at him different than I had ever looked at him before because I was confused, perplexed. I could not understand what positives he took from this movie. It's a broken film. It is just a mess of a film. Obviously there were a lot of production issues with it along the time that it was being made. They had a bunch of rewrites. They ended up having the company that cut the trailer for the movie go back and re-edit the entire film.
You can feel that. You feel the trailerness of it.
It is a disaster of a movie.
And I don't want to say I like it. Please, internet, don't hate me. I have never hated this movie. I like the dirty cholo aesthetic of the Joker. I like the kind of more like dirty street vibes that this got. I thought that was great. I think that's why you bring in David Ayer. And I think David Ayer had a vision for this. It's a mess of a movie, though. And as much as I can defend I feel like I made an omelet. I put all my pieces together for my omelet. All these pieces together are fine. Jared Leto's Joker could be fine. Will Smith's, Deadshot? Yes.
Deadshot,
yeah. I was like, what was? I was thinking of Idris Elba's other character. I was like, oh, too many shooty people in these DC movies. All these pieces work well together. Harley Quinn, Margot's made a staple character for herself with this character. All of them, it just doesn't come together. Do you think an Ayer cut could make it more digestible? Maybe not great, but digestible.
I think absolutely. I think that. And this is an issue that we've run into, unfortunately, more than once with the DCEU, where a director is not able, for whatever reason, to complete their vision. And I think that when you go into something, whether it's Suicide Squad or something that may come up later, Justice League, where, you have a more visionary director, someone like David Ayer, someone like Zack Snyder, who really is there the entire way through their film from conception to execution. When you don't allow them to finish that, or when they're unable to finish that, it really drags the movie down. So I think that somewhere in Suicide Squad, in the footage that we have, probably there is a decent movie, maybe not a great movie, but something that is way more, as you said, digestible.
Yeah.
And I think we were just unfortunately robbed of that in this case. but it certainly does have some pieces that work. And
there's a good skeleton on it. That's
Yes.
about it. Okay, what's else on your bottom of your list?
Just above Suicide Squad, speaking of movies that are incomplete or that didn't have the opportunity to come to fruition in the way that they were intended, is the original Justice League, or Justice League as people have come to call it.
That is my bottom pick, so.
Yeah, now that movie, for me, it was decent up until the end, and the end just completely fell apart. And after watching the Zack Snyder cut, it is bizarre how much they were able to change that movie from what the original intention was. I was, you hear about footage being on the cutting room floor and all of that, but to have the entire ending be completely different, I was shocked. I had never seen anything like it, and the way that they went with it, the different tone. When you have Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon, they are very different creators with very different ideas of how to write dialogue, how to shoot scenes. It was so incredibly jarring, the difference there between the two. And that movie, to me, another one that is just, it's almost unfair to include it on
I agree.
a ranking because it's not a full movie. It's not complete. It's not what it was originally intended to be.
We didn't get to see Batgirl. You know what? They released this movie at least. They could have waited the 1,000 years it took to get the Snyder's, Justice League before they released it. No, they released it. It deserves to be here. I agree. I there's parts of it I like, but what's funny is a lot of the humor, a lot of the jokes that work for me are the ones that Snyder had in his cut.
Yeah.
The added humor is the stuff that I'm like, ooh, this is not great. I think Snyder heard a lot of his criticisms and was trying to alleviate a little bit with his film. I don't think, Snyder's never going to make a comedy. That's not in his wheelhouse. But I think, we'll talk about it on my good side, because Snyder's Justice League is one of my favorite movies from this thing, because it feels so epic in scale, but it also felt like a filmmaker heard the criticism and said, you know what, I'll change some things. You're not getting everything. Not getting everything. And I still, again, I admire bold filmmakers. So what's on the bottom of your list? What's the last of your completed arc there?
So, and this one might be a little controversial perhaps. But for me, again, it is not at the very bottom of the list. The two movies at the bottom of my list are just broken movies. So this is a complete movie, but it is a complete movie that came out 15, 20 years too late, and that is Black Adam. Black Adam to me is...
I didn't even have it on my list. Oh, wow, I forgot.
You forgot about Black Adam?
I forgot. Yeah, wow.
And, which is partly why it's towards the bottom of my ranking. But Black Adam is a movie that... I remember when the first trailer came out. On my channel, I do reviews, but I also do trailer reactions. And after watching the first trailer for Black Adam, I was pointing out all of these pieces that were almost completely ripped out of other comic book movies. There are scenes that are right out of Black Panther. There are scenes that are right out of the original Iron Man. And it's really surprising when you watch them side by side. It's like, oh, this is the exact same thing. You just swapped out characters. And it just felt like a movie that should have come out, probably 2008, but instead it came out, was it 2020? When did that come out? I don't even recall. But
what, Black Adam?
Yeah,
it was last year. So
yeah,
2022.
So Okay. So yeah, it's a movie that should have come out 15 years before it did. The writing, the dialogue, some of the characters.
I agree with you. The filmmaking is 15 years too old.
Yes.
Like, it felt like a movie. I think you kind of said that about Blue Beetle in your review, that it felt like a dated movie, that we would see in the mid-2000s. And that's what Black Adam screams to me is, in the same year that Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, same year that would have came out, Black Adam would have came out.
Yeah, and it would have crushed if it came out at that time.
Well, I mean, we're just talking about Jonah Hex.
Yeah, true.
We're basically just circling around that bad Green Lantern, those.
Yeah. So, and then the ending, of course, of Black Adam is a giant mess. And the fact that you have these demonic creatures that have released upon Earth, and then people are able to just turn them into a pile of dust by smacking them with a baseball bat lightly. It was just a mess of a film. And, it really kind of showed you that you need more than just a star to really sell a movie, because it did not do well financially at all, despite the fact that we have The Rock, one of the biggest movie stars of all time, really promoting that. But at the end of the day, you just can't get away with a poorly conceived and executed movie.
Yeah, no hierarchy of DC was changing there. So, yikes. Yeah, that would have been on the bottom of my list. So I will jump into mine. Justice League, Joss Whedon's version, is at the bottom of my list. Like you said, not a complete film, but boy, my other two are. Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Wow. That was, when you were talking about Susan Sarandon not understanding the film, same thing I felt about Lucy Liu and Helen Mirren in Shazam! Fury of the Gods. These are actresses that normally, again, understand camp. Helen Mirren is in the Fast and Furious movies, eating those movies up.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? There's these Lucy Liu, I've seen the Charlie's Angels movies. She could have gave me something else. And, Rachel Zegler she's fine. She was fine in the movie. Her character wasn't the villain. But, that was just such a misguided mashup of blah. Like, and then what we got with Zachary Levi, who I would put both Shazams at the bottom of my list. The first Shazam has grown on me in the Christmassy kind of vibe, the family vibe. It's grown. Yeah. Everything, all that charm is gone by the sequel. It is a soulless movie. Because, again, the first one has a personality. I don't love the first Shazam. Zachary Levi's Shazam's not my favorite. But, again, it had a personality at least. So, yeah. Did you, equal parts with Shazam, bad movie?
Yeah, so when you talk about Zachary Levi, specifically in the second Shazam movie, you have the main character, Billy Batson, growing up from the first movie, right? He's several years older. He's probably like 16 or so in the second movie. And, you have him playing an authentic teenage boy. And then you have Zachary Levi, when Billy Batson transforms into Shazam, Zachary Levi is playing a 12-year-old.
Yeah, he's still in the first film.
Yeah, he's still in the first film without realizing that the character that he is supposed to be portraying has grown up and is no longer a goofy little kid. And, yes, he's going to be goofy because, that's just his character, but he has matured, and it's almost like Zachary Levi didn't get that memo or I don't want to put the blame on him. It may just be, the script that he was given, that, he's supposed to act in certain ways or express dialogue in a certain way, but it just felt like he forgot to mature with the character. And so that was a big point for me that kind of took me out of the film, because you're supposed to believe that they are the same person, and they are most certainly not.
They are not.
And yeah, the villains, poorly conceived. It just, I enjoyed
finale.
The first Shazam movie enough, but this was a big step down.
Yeah, that dragon ending, all of it, just a mess. So yeah, another movie, the last one on my bottom list. The rest of these movies are ones I find. They're fine by me. They're okay. The rest of them are... this one is the last of the ones I just don't really like. Aquaman. I didn't like it when it came out. I wasn't the biggest fan. You talk about a movie that feels like it took from a lot of other stuff. Yeah. It feels like Black Panther underwater. And I'm not even the biggest Black Panther stan. I think that first film, has some issues to it. Here or there. But boy, every time I think about that, I'm like, wow, but at least that didn't have an octopus playing the drums. Like at least the giant crustacean battle at the end. There's a lot of things. I like the visual style of Aquaman, that final fight scene on that little submarine thing. I love the way that looks. It looks straight up like Sin City graphic novel-y. It looks really cool. James Wan is a dope director when he wants to be. Malignant, badass, underrated, crazy, insane film right there. I think James Wan's fun when he wants to be fun. I just don't feel Aquaman is a fun movie. I like swashbuckling. I like my adventure vibes. It just doesn't have it there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Aquaman made a ton of money at the box office.
$1 billion movie.
Yeah, and it certainly got mostly positive reviews, but at the end of the day, for me as well, it's more middling, and which is interesting because it's when you have a middling DC movie, it's a little different than, let's say, a middling Marvel movie. Not to drum up that whole battle between DC and Marvel, but a lot of DC movies haven't been that great, and so to be in the middle of the pack there, you're basically saying it's not that good of a movie. Whereas if you're in the middle of a Marvel pack, it's like, oh, okay, so it's decent. It's not not bad. Yep. And so for me, this one is it's got the visual spectacle, but the story structure itself is largely forgettable.
100% agree. Let's move on quickly to our top picks. What are you feeling? What's on the top of your DCEU ranking?
Okay, so coming in third place, we'll go over the top three. Coming in third place for me, oddly enough, so the worst DC movie is Suicide Squad, but in the top three is The Suicide Squad, which is the one that came out in 2019, was it?
Yes.
Yes, that one I think.
Nope, 2020. It was a pandemic movie.
Oh, you're right, 2020. That one, it totally turned around, what they did with the first movie. Of course, you have James Gunn coming in to direct, and I believe also write that film. And I think that, with the Suicide Squad, these characters are supposed to be, third-rate villains that are kind of expendable. And he nailed that kind of energy, that vibe of, having characters that the enjoyment of their characters is more in how they get killed and the ridiculous things that they go through. And you have John Cena coming in, really flexing his comedic muscles and creating a character that has gone on to be more successful in his own spin-off show. So I think just everything came together there. And it really comes down to, I think, the writing and directing from James Gunn, and he knew that his style would blend so well with this particular type of story.
Okay, well, I'll do my top three since we can back forth,
Okay.
trying to finish on a decent time so not everyone's here forever. But our top threes are sisters to each other. I'm a Birds of Prey stan. That movie came out in 2020, got a very unfair shake at the box office. Just came out at a weird time. Also, the woke left agenda, people yelled at it. It had so much drama. I think that movie is so fun. So, DC gets criticized for not being fun. Birds of Prey is so fun. I think there's the same appeal against the Margot Robbie, like a campy queer appeal that she brought in that I never thought. The Victor Zsasz Black Mask relationship in that movie is so layered. There is so much happening unsaid between those two characters. It's just a fun movie to watch. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is so fun in her Huntress role. Rosie Perez in a DC movie. Who could give us that? That was a Margot Robbie blessing right there. I think it's a great movie. I think it's really fun. It's colorful. It's vibrant. And Ewan McGregor. It's just so many actors I like in it, having fun, doing well. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but it just sticks out for me. And again, also Margot as Harley. We have not talked about her enough. A godsend to this brand. She has kept so many things afloat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Birds of Prey just didn't get a fair shake. I mean, watching that movie for me, I didn't watch it when it first came out. I watched it a bit later. And I didn't have any real weak points with the movie. I think it was, very funny in a lot of ways. I think Margot Robbie is, made to play that role. Or at least she has done so well with it that now you see her and Harley Quinn and they are inseparable as far as, when you see one, you immediately think of the other, kind of like Tony Stark with Robert Downey Jr. And I think that movie was, as you said, a lot of fun, had some great comedic moments and, some pretty good action. It to me just didn't get a fair shake. But yes, absolutely very good.
What is your number two?
Number two for me it's really interesting because my bottom two and two of my top three mirror each other because at the bottom I had the original Justice League and at the top or in number two, I have Justice League, the Zack Snyder version.
Mine is right there along with you as well.
Are you as well? Okay. So yeah, this movie, it fixes so much of what went wrong with the original. It is very long, of course. It's, I forget exactly how long, but it was multiple
4
parts.
hours.
And say again?
It's like 4 hours.
Like 4 hours, yeah. And, but it's more of a, it's almost like a little mini series, right? So you can watch it almost in episodes. And I think that you really get to see what Zack Snyder was going for with the original movie. I've had my issues with Zack Snyder. I know you absolutely love him, but I've had some issues with him. I think he is an incredible visual storyteller. I think he, at times, one of the things that is not necessarily a strength to him is the way that he writes dialogue a lot of times.
Give him a better writer. Stop calling Goyer Ontario, man.
Yes, I think if we can pair him up with somebody who is known for writing, I always joked around about if we could get Kevin Smith and Zack Snyder together because, Kevin Smith is a diehard comic book fan and writes, his dialogue is so well done and but he's himself not a very visual director.
Even Christopher Nolan or Jonathan Nolan could really help. They're very close friends as well. There's a very, kinship with Snyder and Nolan. As much as fans think their movies are so far apart, they're not that far apart. They're very much cousins in the filmmaking world. No, I love that you picked it here. I love that movie so much. I have it little dark side shrine back there and everything. I mean, the dark side inclusion was great. Steppenwolf, the change of Steppenwolf between movies. I love Steppenwolf in Snyder's Justice League.
Yes.
He's cool, kind of pathetic, but also there's so many layers. And I mean, that moment, as Ezra can have as much drama, that moment where Flash turns back time is
incredible.
Maybe not an Oscar-winning moment, as remember that time it won the fan award at the Oscars. Maybe not that worthy, but it's great. So yeah, what's your number one?
Number one for me, again, gonna probably get a little controversial with this, but this is, my personal perspective and the movies that were, more impactful for me, and that is the only Superman movie we've really gotten, Man of Steel. To me, I think Man of Steel is a movie that gets better with age, and
love it.
as you go back to watch it, are you on the same page as me here?
It's not in my top pick. Mine is the sequel to it, but yeah, I love Man of Steel. I think it works on so many good levels.
Absolutely.
God, General Zod, Michael Shannon,
Michael Shannon is incredible. It's different. I think the reason why a lot of people, not even a lot of people, but why some people didn't necessarily like it when it first came out was because it was such a departure from what we had seen from Superman before. When it comes to the Christopher Reeves movies or even the Brandon Routh movie in 2005, which was basically
the animated series, I think also has a very distinct thing in our memory as well, was, what Superman was in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. That really burned in our brains too.
Yes, and so it was definitely a departure from that. And, I know a lot of people gave it flack because, it was a bit darker. But I think that Henry Cavill was born to play Superman. It's really unfortunate that he's not going to be continuing that in that role. But I think he was incredible in it. You can nitpick some of the things about the fact that Metropolis gets destroyed and millions of people probably lost their lives and all that. But I think it was a fantastic film. And honestly, if not at the top of the DCEU, it is certainly one of the best movies that have come out in that stretch of film.
Where was all that criticism about everyone dying in that first Avengers movie? I don't remember everyone complaining there. That was a year later or a year before. True. Anyways, my bitterness between the Marvel DC rivalry has gotten better. One, because the Marvel fans are fighting with the Marvel fans. They're in their own battles, fighting for life over there. DC fans were like, baby, welcome to the struggle. But no, my number one pick is Batman v Superman, mostly the extended edition. I think it's Snyder at his best. I think it is a dramatic film that actually feels dramatic. There's a moment where Lex meets Bruce and Clark in that little charity event. I think that is some of the best acting Snyder's got out of. One, he has three good actors there. I think Eisenberg is maybe not the best Lex Luthor we know from the comics or the animated series. He's so fun in that movie. I think when he calls him Clark Joe at the end of that movie, when he's throwing the Martha photos, I'm like, this man is in a movie. I think it's a well acted movie, well directed. It's fast forward. We're definitely fast forwarding the DC story way more than we should. But I think it works in a lot of ways. I think it's a well-made movie that I think a lot of people hated very harshly. Is it the best movie I've ever seen? No. But I think that 26% it has on Rotten Tomatoes is strange. That blows my mind. It got hit hard, and that was my first year as a film critic. That's my first blockbuster I ever reviewed. And I loved it, and then I was like, maybe I don't belong into this world. So yeah, Flickering Myth has definitely heard my story enough. What did you think about it? Do you hate it? Are you
No. I think it certainly has certain weak points in the movie, and I think those are probably blown out of proportion. The whole Martha thing and everything is
not great, but blown out of proportion.
It's silly. That is a silly thing but it's not. That doesn't break the movie by any means. One thing I love about it is it's really the first time we got to see the new Batman and what they were doing with him, and I love the warehouse scene where he goes in to save Martha Kent. And I think, we got to see a lot of really cool action. And it was almost like a tease for something that never came. We never did get that Ben Affleck Batman movie. But to me, it was as a fan, as a Batman fan, as a DC fan, somebody who grew up reading comics and watching the animated series, I think it was really amazing to see these characters that we love on screen together for the first time. And yes, it's not a perfect movie, but certainly deserves better than it got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That Trinity pose when they're about to find Doomsday, it's burned in my head. A great moment for DC fans. Thank you, Tony, so much for joining me. I love your ranking. I love doing this. You will be back again. Thank you all for tuning in so much. Oh, we have a lot to talk about in the comments. Comment down below. I want to know your top picks. What did you think of Blue Beetle? Share your feelings down below.